Alright. Hi guys, welcome to my presentation. I did my skill learning project on a basketball free throw. So I kind of broke this down into 4 phases based on kind of my own personal experience, and then followed it up with some of the more research-based ways to break down a free throw. Starts with the dip, kind of bend your knees, familiarize yourself with the ball. The trunk is a little bit flexed, eyes are focused on the ball. Moving into the set, you can bring the ball into a shooting position while extending the trunk and standing a little more upright, keeping the small bend in the knees. This phase sets up the drive/shot in which you extend your knees and jump. And I'm sorry, this picture doesn't have jumping, but for me, jumping is really needed to produce enough force behind the ball to get all the way to the basket. You're going to jump though as you bring the ball overhead with your shooting hand. The guide hand should kind of gently follow the path of the ball but not assist with the shot. The ball is released at the top of the jump, and then the last phase is the follow through. The wrist goes from full extension to full flexion as the ball is released to put spin on it. The player should kind of land with slightly bent knees to absorb the impact from hitting the ground. So some of my goals with this project were I wanted to hit this outcome performance goal of how many total free throws can I successfully make out of 30. This was really attainable because free throws are very simple, repetitive motions. Essentially, it's about form, repetition, practice. Keep a practice plan simple. Just kind of do it over and over again and really get those motor patterns down. I did set up my practice plans to run a couple times a week for about 10 weeks, which was the length of the semester. And for me, the biggest piece of this was I was just trying to improve my own personal number of shots made. I wasn't trying to be an NBA player. I'm not on the Linfield team. I'm just trying to be better for me. So that being said, my pre-test, I made about 4 out of 30. So starting pretty low, but that was okay because it gave me room to improve. So kind of starting out here, you can see that I did not use my legs. So that was one of the things that I mentioned in those 4 phases of the free throw. My aim is pretty much right at the front of the rim. And the angle of the ball is less than 45 degrees, not optimal to make that shot. I don't really do anything when I get the ball. I just kind of grab it and huck it up there. No real technique, no real form, not even any real consistency. So I kind of skip along here. So it says I made 3 out of 30. I can't count. It was actually 4 out of 30. All right, so how do we fix it? How do we make it better? So I kind of came up with this initial practice plan with my teacher, about 30 minutes, and I kind of broke it down. Starting off here with ball handling, just kind of general skills to work with the ball, get familiar with it. How does it, how much does it weigh? How does it feel in my hand? How much control do I have over it when I go to take a shot? Moving into backboard shots, I'll give you a little demo of that later, but just kind of working on control and accuracy. Definitely spent some time on form. I didn't have any form at all when I initially started this. I gave myself initially this choice piece, which I took out in my later practice plan. I was just trying to build in some autonomy to make this a little bit more fun, but these practices are already so short that I kind of just wanted a set plan, get in, get out, get it done. I wanted something to do rather than to have to think about it, so I ended up taking that piece out. This 5 in a row drill, basically starting like right in front of the hoop, like uncomfortably close to the bottom of the hoop. Trusted my teacher on this. He said, this is really going to help you understand where the ball needs to go. So you're standing under the hoop, and you basically just shoot 5 in a row from that spot, take a big old step back, shoot 5 more from that spot, and work your way back all the way to the free throw line. Just kind of slowly building in how much power is needed to get the ball to the hoop. That angle is slowly changing, but not so much so that it's uncomfortable. It made a lot of sense, and I really liked this drill actually. And then ending with free throws. This was one of the biggest changes, is that I spent almost double the time in my modified practice plan working on the full execution of the skill. I felt that this was really beneficial because of this outcome goal of how many free throws can you make, that I needed to be practicing that for a good portion of each of my practice plans. So there's no choice, and kind of decrease the overall time for each of these just to keep it simple. Overall practice time too went down from 30 minutes to 20 minutes. And I felt this to be a way more streamlined, easy to follow practice plan. So one of the things that I would do for that ball control piece, I'd break the skill down into just using my hands. So this is what I call fractionation, so kind of just working on right and left hand dribbling. This is just my left hand, but it forced me to maintain control of the ball and dribble with force and accuracy. Another fractionation drill, this is a ball control drill. So I just kind of find a spot on the ball and hit that same spot over and over again, want the ball to come right back into my hand. More challenging than you'd think, because you do have to have that fine motor control to get the ball to come right back to you without bouncing way far off the wall, as well as you need to get it to that same spot each time. This really helped me understand how to move the ball when I brought the skill all the way back together. Another type of drill, this backboard side drill I mentioned earlier. This is more segmentation, so this is me working through full range of my upper body free throw shot, but I'm not really using my legs. I do a little bit here because it's hard not to, but I'm essentially trying to find a spot on the hoop up here, about the same height as the basket, and I just want the ball to slide right back down the backboard to me. This one's tough. I did hit a couple of these, but it takes a little bit of time to find your rhythm, and it really challenged me to get up to the height that is needed to get the ball into the hoop. It's also really challenging because you're right underneath this backboard, but again, this really did prove to be helpful in overall competence with the free throw. So feedback has primary functions including motivation, information, reinforcement. My teacher really successfully able to use feedback to help me kind of fix my mistakes, but I also was able to give myself feedback through intrinsic cues. So when I would release the ball from my hand, I could feel the force that I was needing to launch the ball kind of proprioceptively. Once the ball was released, I was able to use my vision to track the trajectory of the ball, watch and see if it hit the rim, backboard, did I miss entirely? Happened more often than not. It was really frustrating to feel the ball kind of leave my hand off center and just know that it wasn't going to go in. But those were really also beneficial intrinsic cues because it kind of I was able to preemptively get a feel for the shot before I even took it, which over time I was able to kind of work on and correct and narrow. Some extrinsic verbal cues that my teacher was able to use. So these are cues external to the body. My favorite one that I've heard since I was a little kid, put your hand in the cookie jar, just really emphasizing that flick of the wrist follow through as if you were going to reach your hand into the cookie jar is really helps put spin on the ball as it's released. And when I wouldn't do this, I'm pretty sure I would not have made a single shot if I didn't follow through with my wrist. Eyes on the target just kind of helps me give a specific target where the ball should go. And elbow stays directly under the ball and over your knee. Kind of place my arm in that optimal position to get the correct angle of the shot. So I used Fitz and Posner's learning stages. I kind of have this little blooper video in here. So I spent most of this time in the cognitive stage, learning these fundamental movements, a lot of errors. Performance was pretty inconsistent. I was primarily thinking about what I was doing rather than kind of just easing into it and going with the flow. I think a lot of this was I was alone for a lot of my practice sessions. Didn't have any reassurance or feedback from my teacher. It was really difficult to be sure if I was performing the skills and the techniques correctly. When my teacher was there, he was able to, give me really good slight modifications that would get my shot back on track. But when you're by yourself, it's really difficult when you're continually failing. I think towards the end, I may have gotten to the associative stage. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So again, playing into this even more so, this is kind of how I felt when there were other people in the gym, especially at Linfield. You know, stinky Linfield boys. I would get embarrassed when I would make a mistake, and there's guys, quote unquote, watching me while I'm in the gym, and that probably was the furthest thing from the truth. They're playing their own game, doing their own thing, but I was just overly critical of my own self and my performance if there are other people around. Um, Especially when I was by myself because I didn't have my teacher there to kind of give me reassurance that, hey, you are on the right track and you're doing great, which I oftentimes was, but it's really easy to get into your own head when you're not in an environment that's like perfectly suited for learning. So maybe I didn't feel quite like this guy every time, but there definitely were things that played into my ability to learn from the environment. So here's my quick little post test. So, hey, look at that. I improved. So my percentage went up to 11 out of 30, 36% from the line. Again, not really trying to get hired by the Blazers, but for me, this was a pretty big jump. You can already see this difference in that I have an established routine with each shot. I utilize my whole body to get enough force behind the ball to get it into the basket. I line my forward toe up to the center of the free throw line. My shoulders are slightly angled to the basket, and my shooting arm, we'll see here in a second, is lined up to shoot with the ball in line with the target. And even though I didn't make all of these shots, most of them are pretty on track to go in. They're just barely off. I felt like maybe this wasn't my best performance that I could have given for a post test, but I didn't want to redo it as this, was my chance to show how much I had improved. So I think if I would continue to practice, maybe with some more diligence, that this number could go up even more. I was able to kind of track that improvement in performance on a performance curve. So basically, these are curves that compare pre and post test scores. I also have a couple mid training program scores in there as well. This was kind of a negatively accelerating curve, indicating that I rapidly improved initially and then gradually my rate of improvement decreased. Performance curves don't necessarily mean that motor learning happened, but there can be an indicator that there's a potential that it did. My teacher observed that during my practice sessions initially, it's like just focus on the drill. Like I couldn't do anything else. I just had to focus on what I was doing. And towards the end, I was able to kind of hold conversations with him as we were working through things that were external to basketball, which is kind of that shift to maybe associative that I talked about a little bit earlier with the Fitz and Posner stages. I also didn't show a ton of my teacher during this presentation just because I initially had one teacher and then I had to switch due to some external reasons. So neither of those folks were in the class, so I apologize that there weren't a ton of demos of the teacher giving me some of those cues, but I'd be happy to provide those if anybody was curious. So in conclusion, skills that are simple or may seem simple, like free throw, can be way more challenging than you think. This for me was a challenge. I didn't realize I had some little kid basketball experience, but my motor patterns have definitely changed. I kind of have grown, muscle mass is different. But overall, I did end up having a really good coach, and I did feel like I improved and had more competence overall with this skill. And despite overcoming a lot of missed shots and air balls and that kind of thing, I did see some improvement, and that definitely led to increased motivation to keep trying, to kind of get out of my own head and just kind of trust my body once I kind of had developed those motor patterns, which was really valuable going forward because I kind of understand that, I just want to get better, and then finally kind of getting better, which is really awesome, and I'm really thankful for my teacher in helping me get there. So yeah, here's some references. Does anybody have any questions?